Hi, I'm Marty Nemko. From a practical standpoint, the probably one word that most defines what I believe is key to living life well, not from a spiritual, but from a practical perspective, is the word curate. I like to think that if we curate well, we are, even if our income is not great, we are well on the way to a good life, curating products, curating people we choose to spend time with, even curating our pets. I'll talk about ways to curate, my best shots at how to wisely curate everything from where you live to your education to what you buy in terms of products, curating your job and work, and your career, your friends, your family members, who you spend more time with and less time with, how you choose your professionals, from your doctor to your accountant. If you're self-employed or you're working, can you curate your customers and clients? Yes, you can. Even pets. In any case, so let's get started. First, the largest two purchases that most people ever make is their home and their education. There is too high a premium, in my judgment, for a home, a big home, especially in a prestigious neighborhood. It ends up costing 3-4 times as much money, and more importantly, it greatly reduces your number of career choices if you need to live in a place like that. And also it increases your financial insecurity. The smart money, and it makes me seem very penurious, but I really believe that the freedom you get from being able to choose your career with less regard to how much it earns and the freedom from worry is to choose a small place, whether you're renting or buying, in a dicey neighborhood and that isn't too large. That's going to save you an absolute fortune in terms of education. I am well aware that we live in a designer label country, and going to a Berkeley or a Stanford or Harvard or Yale or Princeton or the rest of them is going to add value to your career potential, to how you're perceived, to your own self-esteem. You'll get to meet interesting people, all that. But in terms of the actual amount of added value of that versus the cost, even including financial aid, unless you're lucky enough to be poor or a desired demographic or an athlete, it's not worth the money. I've often said that status is the enemy of contentment. And I honestly believe that somebody who could get into a prestigious college that's hard to get into, if he or she starts at a community college and then transfers to almost any four-year institution, will end up feeling good about the money saved and therefore invested or whatever. And people don't understand why I would actually think you're going to have a better experience at a community college or any old four-year college that you transfer to than going to a Berkeley or a University of Minnesota or any of those big famous research universities. They're famous because of their research and their sports teams, neither of which have anything to do with the quality of the experience you're going to have and the amount of care that you're going to get as an undergraduate especially, but even as a graduate student. You can save a fortune in education. That's curating. Curating your home well is discerning, making discerning judgments. Now I want to talk about products you buy. When you stop to think about it, the people who are the best, say, designers, whether it be of furniture or appliances or even chocolate, are going to be those that sell the most units in general. And the manufacturing process is going to be most refined. And that's why normally the actual satisfaction you get from a Whirlpool appliance or a Mr. Coffee maker or an IKEA piece of furniture or a Toyota car or a Sony or a Pioneer or a Kenwood or a Panasonic bit of electronics or Samsung or a Casio watch. You're going to be getting usually the best designed pieces and with the best most reliable manufacturing process. I love, my wife and I have parties, and one of the things we've done over the years is we have blind tastings and blind comparisons. And we had a diamond, an expensive diamond worth 10 or 20,000 bucks, and an equivalent size cubic zirconium. And most people preferred the cubic zirconium, which costs, that size, a 2-carat cubic zirconium is 5, 10, 20 bucks, depending on how well you buy it, instead of 10,000. And it's not just the dollars, it's the freedom that not spending unnecessarily buys you. Chocolate, we did a comparison between Dove chocolate and expensive frou-frou, $25 a pound chocolate. And 2/3 of the people preferred the cheap stuff. But the difference, even if they could tell the difference, is it worth the difference between, $3 a pound and 25 a pound? And we definitely do this with wine. I live in Napa, and the center of wine, and I have these fairly wine-centric people who come to our parties. We do blind tasting, and generally it's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. In the blind tasting, pick the $10 wine versus the $100 wine. We never buy a $100 wine, but we usually get them as gifts because you live in Napa, that stuff gets exchanged. Status can be the enemy of the contentment, and remember that, again, I want to stress that point. It's not just the dollars. It's the freedom you have from worry about spending more than you have, freedom to choose the job you want. I want to give just an oddball example of curation having nothing to do with money. I hybridize roses. I develop new varieties of roses that are very resistant to disease, so they never need to be sprayed. I call them no-spray roses or Butte Ease roses. A rose is not a rose is not a rose. When you go and buy a plant, there is an enormous difference. There are some rose plants you're going to get that are just covered with disease, or they flowers open too quickly, or big, ugly, gawky plants. Just doing a little Googling. I'm not asking you to spend a lot of time on this. But Google best roses before you go to the nursery or whatever, or buy them online. And, the internet makes it really easy to curate everything. That's my default thing before I buy anything, even an inexpensive thing, because it's kind of fun. I got to buy sun-dried tomatoes, and they're out of stock for a while. Who knows how long at Trader Joe's, which, by the way, is another of the brands I love tremendously, rather than Whole Foods. But I looked up sun-dried tomatoes, and I saw there's actually very little difference in the ratings, so it didn't matter. I just bought the one that is least expensive but still has good ratings. Do curate easily using the internet. Now, you wouldn't normally think about curating your career, but you really can. Most times, the best career you have is not one that you curated. You tend to kind of fall into it by chance because your family member was in it, or you had a great charismatic professor, or you had some family connection that opened the door, or you applied for a bunch of jobs, not really sure what the hell you wanted, but you got there. But usually it's a lot easier to move up in your career by staying within your career and becoming expert at it and moving up than a brand new career. But after that career choice, there is a lot of curation. So many people are so driven by fear. They may have a job description that's ill-advised, or I just had a client who I'll just say lives in the Midwest, and he moved a long way to get this job at a very prestigious Fortune 500 company, but this particular division was chaotic. This guy likes structure, and it's a very chaotic company. And even though the money is good, he's agreed that he's got to look elsewhere. You got to have the bravery to curate your job, whether it be, maybe it's a boss, maybe stay within your existing organization, but switch to a different, try to make the affirmative effort to switch to a better boss or a better job in your same field, or even, yes, change careers. You can also curate your friends and family. You're thrust into your family at random, but even within your family, you really can decide to spend more or less or even no time with certain family members. Painful as that may be. I will admit I have one family member who I have just concluded is much, much more pain than this person is worth. And then I have another who I minimize my time with for the same reason, but I can't eliminate my time with that person. Be more kind. We tend to stay stuck in the same old relationship. We feel guilty. We feel obligated. But there's nothing wrong with cutting your losses, whether it be a platonic friend, a romantic friend, or even a family member. It's hard to break up with that romantic partner. It is painful. But my clients who have done so have mustered the courage to be willing to be solo and even lonely, rather than a relationship that does not bring out the best in you, that where you're ending up having to do too much caretaking or whatever, is curation maybe among its most important. Of course, we curate our professionals. Again, the internet makes it easy to choose a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant. Look for lots of good Google reviews and Yelp reviews. And then reach out to one or two and see if, the average reviews may not be necessarily what's right for you. So treat that internet research as a first curation. And I would trust the internet research more than an individual reference from a friend, because you've got a much larger sample size that's recommending that particular professional. I want to say a word about investment advisors. I understand that some people just do need their hands held, but so many people go into that industry being a financial advisor, not because they care about people so much, they want to make a lot of money. And they sell high-priced products or have undue fees. I am not paid by Vanguard, just like I'm not paid by Toyota. I'm not paid by anybody to promote their products. I am really, part of the reason, because I keep my spending under control, I cannot be bought. Everything you're hearing is my truth for what it's worth. And I'm a big believer in Vanguard because their fees are the lowest. None of their people are on commission. They have a wide range of products. You could do far worse than do just a little bit of introductory reading, call the Vanguard people, start your investment in perhaps in one of their their index funds, their ETFs. And you'll save a fortune. That's curation. You can curate your, even when you're working, by the way, I'm a little going out of order. You can curate your customers. Of course, the customer is not always right. If somebody's abusing you, you really have a right to say, I don't think we're really quite right for each other. And I do that with about 1 out of 20 clients. Either when they've, even after, when I've had the first session and since I can't champion this person and we're just incompatible, I will quietly, tactfully fire that client. And even if you're working in retail, if you're being abused, you don't need to. The customer is not always right. Part of your curation is you can curate your customers and say, I don't think you're quite right. We're really not very compatible. Should I refer you to another salesperson, or maybe you want to try another store? That's the right thing to do. And if your boss gives you hell, I think you have a right to quietly say why you feel that's appropriate. And the last thing I want to talk about is you can even curate your pets. Again, the status thing gets in the way of wise curation. Some people, I think stupidly, insist on purebred dogs. Purebred dogs are more likely to be inbred and therefore more prone to disease. And disease is not an abstract word. It's pain. It's pain for you. It's pain for the dog. It's expensive. Vet bills can be unbelievably high. Where if it's a mixed breed, a mutt, you don't have that problem. There's a hybrid vigor, if you will. Now, some people who want to say I believe in purebreds. They say, well, you know what you're getting. That's not true. Within a similar breed, there can be enormous variation, and you can tell a lot about what a dog is like from your just initial getting to meet that puppy or that dog. If the dog is fearful, that says one thing. If the dog is barking, that says one thing. Or if, like my sweet, sweet doggy Hachi and all my previous dogs, who gently come over to you and put their head on your as you lean down on your knee, or lick your face, or smiling. Dogs actually smile in my judgment. Maybe not really, but that tells you a lot. That individual dog, just like you wouldn't want to be racist and judge an entire race as being of one characteristic, nor should you judge your dogs based on some average. You go and you check out that dog. I know a close friend who spent $3,000 on a purebred dog who's the biggest pain in the ass you'll ever see in your life. jumps on people. He actually cut with his nails. He keeps jumping, and he cut my skin from his jumping. And he races around like a maniac all the time. My poor dog, who comes along, hides under the table to avoid this dog. I know somebody else who drove 2,000 miles to pick up their purebred dog. My sweet dogs, I save a life. I go to a shelter of some sort. I sign up for these, when my dogs live a long time, but when they die, my previous dog Einstein died, and I simply signed up for all these alerts from these websites that aggregate all of the shelters and rescues and pounds until I find a wonderful dog that on paper seems great. Then I go and I meet the dog. And as I said, the example I just gave was not theoretical. My sweet Hachi, just kind of when we opened the door to where he was in his little condo or cage or whatever you want to call it, he woke up from his nap and he sidled up to me and put his head on my thigh, and that's all I needed to know. I was real prepared with more thorough personality tests, but I cried when he did that, and I said, that's my dog, and it's turned out to be a wonderful, wonderful dog. Anyway, curation. I actually had to turn down a dog who seemed wonderful, but I then took him to the vet for an exam, and the dog has a bad heart murmur, and I'm a pretty vigorous exerciser, and I need a dog who can come with me. And this dog couldn't. I had the pain of having to take this dog back to the shelter. So all part of curation. Curation is, it's a very rational process, and that's sometimes emotionally painful. In any case, those are my best thoughts on curation. I think you can see how if you live a curated life, you're going to live better, happier, with lower stress and more satisfaction. Whether it be, I'll just briefly summarize, whether it be not buying a home in a Tony neighborhood that's big, but a smaller home in a perhaps dicey neighborhood where you'll save a fortune and have minimal difference, for example, in the crime rate. Choosing an education not based on the designer label, because while there is benefit to the designer label on a diploma, it is not worth all that money usually, unless it's maybe a Harvard or Stanford. Maybe for then, yes, it's probably worth it. But most people don't get into Harvard or Stanford. They go a notch or three lower, and they spend big money on colleges that are almost as expensive as the Harvard and Stanford without the prestige, and that seems to me foolish. Community colleges are the most underrated. Buy products from quality mainstream manufacturers, not the fancy ones, because if you were a great designer, you would probably want to make the biggest difference possible, and so you're going to work for the companies that produce the most units, whether in my case I'm giving examples of Toyota and Whirlpool and Sony and Panasonic and Kenwood and IKEA furniture. I didn't mention that. I have bought more expensive furniture when I was younger and more foolish. I recently had to replace a chest of drawers. And I got one that was high. I went online, and on IKEA there was got great rating, 4.5 stars. And I bought this thing. I'm terrible at fixing it, so I paid somebody $75 to assemble it. And it's wonderful. The drawers open and close easily even when they're full. It looks great for whatever it was, $125 or whatever it was. Unlike very often you go and you get Ethan Allen or whatever, a big brand, it costs you $1,000. Okay, so, you're getting my point. You can curate the non-obvious things, your work, that is your specific job, your boss. You can curate your friends and family. It's hard to cut your losses from a human perspective, but in the end you will be happy. You're better solo than with a bad relationship, platonic or romantic, or with spending time with a family member who you know is not in your best interest to spend time with. Be careful in choosing your professionals, doctor, lawyer, accountant. The internet makes it very easy. Google reviews and Yelp reviews make it very easy to at least do your initial screening, then try a first appointment, and then trust your gut. Is that person compatible with you or not? You can often, if you're self-employed, you can occasionally fire a client if it doesn't feel like it's in your interest or the client's interest, or simply you're a poor fit. And you can certainly curate your pets. Do remember that general principle. The status is often the enemy of contentment. Mercedeses and BMWs and Jaguars break down far more often than Toyotas and Hondas and Subarus. But they have less status. But there's nothing prestigious about breaking down on the side of the road. And even pets, purebreds, are much more likely to have disease and cost thousands of dollars, whereas from a shelter it's going to be $100, $200, whatever, and you get hybrid vigor, and you'll learn as much or more about that individual dog by checking it out first in terms of its demeanor and its personality, and then taking it to a vet, than by thinking you're going to get security by picking something from a litter of purebreds. In any event, those are my best thoughts. I like to end every podcast with my favorite phrase that I do believe, my favorite quote, I don't know what it is, that is more valuable and more important today in our censorious society, our cancel culture, than in my entire lifetime. And that is a quote from Frank A. Clark, who said, "We find comfort among those who agree with us, growth among those who don't."